Hey, what's up everybody? This is Mr. Cash and we're gonna do another video of the Egans of respiratory care. And we're gonna do today, I'm gonna make a video about chapter 9, the respiratory system. I was gonna skip this chapter, but somebody have asked for it because most of this chapter is anatomy and physiology of the respiratory system. And just gonna zoom in and we're gonna start. Okay, like I always start with so this is chapter 9, the respiratory system. So we always start with the chapter objectives, and I just want to say one more thing. Thank you for all of you that is putting a comment below, because that helping me to understand what you want me to do and how can I improve these videos. And I'm happy that it's helping other people, especially students who's really serious in this understanding this chapter and understanding basically the whole book. It takes a lot of time, so these videos might take longer than I was expecting. I was thinking I'm just gonna do videos how to study only for 20 minutes, but they take longer than that. And this is my way of studying, and I'm also learning at the same time with you guys. So we're gonna start. So the chapter objectives. So this first sentence tells you, after reading this chapter you will be able to. So after the whole chapter, reading it, there's reading where you just read the whole chapter, and there's reading and understanding little by little. And I always think that if you read the whole chapter in detail and then right after you can read the whole chapter without detail, it helps. Whatever is best for you. So they're saying after this reading all this chapter, you should be able to do the following things. So the first thing that you are able to do is state the major development events of the respiratory system. State the major developmental events of the respiratory system. The second one you should know is to describe how genes control lung development. So this one you're gonna understand how the genes, so make a line, how genes control lung development. The third one is describe the key elements of normal fetal circulation. Fetal circulation. The third one is state what happens to the respiratory system at birth. So this one basically tell us what happens to the respiratory system only during birth. State what happens to the respiratory system at birth. I'm not sure. Okay, how many we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We are at the fifth one. The fifth one says, describe the developmental events in the respiratory system that continue after birth. Now this one says, identify the main structures in the thorax and describe their functions. Identify and describe the primary and accessory muscles of breathing. Describe how the pulmonary and bronchial circulations are organized in their functions. Describe how somatic and automatic nervous system connect to and control the lungs and respiratory muscles. Identify the major structures of the upper respiratory tract and lower and how they function. Like I said, it's anatomy physiology, so it's always, you're gonna hear this word over and over, the structures and the function of those structures. So what it means is, like, if you're not, I'm sure a lot of people understand this, but not, if you don't understand this, is the structure is anything that is there, and the function how it works. Describe how the lungs are organized into lobes and segments in the airways that supply them with ventilation. Describe how and why airways produce and move mucus. Describe how the structures in the respiratory bronchioles and alveoli are organized. Describe the blood gas barrier. Okay, so we should know all of this by the end of the chapter. Now, when we read the chapter and we see one of these right here, we can always go back and try to understand it in detail. Now, we're going to go to the chapter outline. So first, what we're going to learn about is development of respiratory system, transition from uterine to extrauterine life. So, in this case, since I couldn't pronounce this word, uterine to extrauterine life, it means what I get the thought of is when you are before birth. This is basically in the stomach, and not a stomach in the womb. And this is outside when you are in nature, external. So the transition, so what happens from one place to another, from from pregnancy, basically when a mother is pregnant with a child. So what happens when you are in the womb until you come out to life. So it says placental structure and function. So this is the placenta, function and structure and function. Fetal circulation. So this is the fetal, and this is the circulation, means blood vessels and all other structures. Cardiopulmonary events at birth. What happens at birth to the heart and lung. Cardiopulmonary means cardio, the heart, and pulmonary, the lungs. So what happens to the heart and the lungs at birth? And then the second one that we have here, postnatal lung development, upper airway, lower airways and alveoli, development of vascular, lymphatic, and nervous system, chest wall development, diaphragm, and lung volume. Respiratory system in the adult. So this section will be about respiratory system in the adult. Surface features of the thorax, components of the thorax wall, respiratory muscles, pleural membranes, space and fluid, mediastinum, and lungs. Pulmonary, vascular, lymphatic, and nervous system. Pulmonary circulation, bronchial circulation, lymphatics, nervous control of the lungs, afferent pathways, anatomy of the respiratory tract, upper respiratory tract and lower respiratory tract. So this is the chapter outline. It is always best to go to this when you're studying, because this tells you what you're supposed to know at the end of this chapter. Now here they have some key terms, which is very helpful. The key terms, what I advise you to do is take every word, trying to understand what it is and where is it at. So the accessory muscles of breathing. So you always look up and see what are they. The acinus, the ali, the alveolar cavity membrane, the alveoli, the angle of Lewis, anterior nares. So all these terms will be very helpful if you understand them. Will help you a lot if you want to understand the whole chapter. So we're still here. This is the second page, and it has many other terms that you should look at. So I'm gonna start with the first paragraph. So I'm doing this studying is for, what we're gonna do is read the whole chapter. Every paragraph I'm gonna read it in detail, and I'm gonna write down questions as I go along. By the end of this chapter is a very huge chapter, and also that this chapter, since it's anatomy and physiology, you're going to have a lot of recall questions from it. So what I like to do is create questions as I go along with it. And then at the end of the chapter, I have questions and I have the answers for them and I know where I got them from. So any question in a test, you can always, you have a 50 to 70 to 90% chance of answering that question because you understand the material and you know where is it from. And you'll be surprised. You make questions to yourself and on the test, they be the same questions they're asking you that you made. Okay, so the primary function of the respiratory system is the continuous absorption of oxygen and excretion of carbon dioxide. So the first sentence, you can always make a question from it. So you can get this piece of paper here and you can write here. Question number 1. What is the primary function of the respiratory system? So this is a question I just made from the first sentence. So this is a good sentence and this is a good question to ask on the test. You'll be surprised a lot of people will get it wrong. But you have to understand and make the answer simple to what you know. So it says, what is the primary function of the respiratory system? If you go here, the primary function of the respiratory system is continuous. This is a key. Absorption, when you absorb something, you take something of oxygen and excretion of carbon dioxide. So you write here, continuous absorption of oxygen and excretion of CO2. So this is the answer. That's all it is. So I made one question here. So I'm gonna move on. This exchange between the gas of the atmosphere and blood is termed external respiration. So the exchange between the gas of the atmosphere and blood is termed external respiration. This is very important here. So what they're saying here, so let's take this term here and we're gonna write it down on this piece of paper, right? So we're gonna write external So basically what I'm gonna put is, what is external respiration? This is the basic thing. Now here it tells you this gas, okay, this exchange between the gas, we have a gas of the atmosphere, and between blood, atmosphere and blood is termed external respiration. So internal respiration means this is the gas I'm gonna make. Let's say this is a gas in here. This is the atmospheric gas. Like the outside gas, what we're breathing right now is oxygen, and we live in the atmosphere. So this atmosphere is oxygen. So this is the oxygen in the atmosphere. And this is a blood vessel. Alright? This is a red blood cell. This is a blood vessel. Correct? Blood vessel. And this is the oxygen in the atmosphere. And this is blood vessel. Blood. So this is your blood, red blood cell. And this is the gas of the atmosphere. So exchange between the atmosphere and the blood is called external respiration. So between blood, I'm gonna put it here. Between blood and atmosphere is called external respiration. So you have to break it down and understand it, right? Now let's move on to the second one. This process supports internal respiration. Now they give you a second one. They gave you external respiration and internal respiration, which is exchange of gas between blood and tissue. This is the key thing. Now you have your tissue, which is the cells. So a cell makes a tissue. You learned this in anatomy, physiology. Let's pretend that this is the cells in your body. And this is the blood vessel. So, this is the atmosphere. This is right here is the gas that I was saying. Correct? So, here, between blood vessel and the tissue cell is called internal respiration. So you understand here is external respiration, which is up here. The word, I'm not going to write it again. Okay, now we understand that between the atmosphere, exchange of gas means oxygen goes in, CO2 goes out. Exchange. This is what they mean here. So they gave two terms to understand. External respiration, which is right here in the chapter. External respiration, it is gas exchange between the atmosphere, oxygen, when you inhale from the environment, to your blood, straight to the blood, is called external respiration, which is external, outside. So it happens between, this is still inside your lung is happening, but it's not between, it's only between, external respiration is between your blood vessels and the atmosphere. And then when it happens between your veins and your tissue, most likely. But it's the capillaries in the lung, but I'm not going to go in there. I don't want to confuse you. I just want you to understand these terms. So internal respiration is between the tissue, which is the tissue, the cells of your body, and the blood. So I think we understand this point now. Now you see all these details that I came up with just from reading the first paragraph. So this is really studying in detail and trying to understand what you're reading. Okay, which is exchange of gases between blood and tissue. To carry out external respiration, the system brings gas into close proximity with the following blood in the pulmonary circulation system. This close match of gas and blood across a large crosses a large but extremely thin blood gas barrier membrane enables efficient gas exchange to occur via simple diffusion. This is important here. So they're saying here that the gas exchange, it occurs through through simple diffusion. Okay, now we're gonna go into simple diffusion. I'm sure if you understand what if you took anatomy physiology, you understand simple diffusion. Simple diffusion. Okay, this is important here because they say here to carry out external respiration. So they're saying external respiration, we said between the atmosphere and the blood. They're going to tell you how it happens. To carry out external respiration, the system brings gas into close proximity. So the respiratory system, when you inhale, it brings it all the way closer to the flow, to the blood, right, to the pulmonary capillaries, which is pulmonary circulation system. So they're talking about the capillaries in the lung. This close match of gas and blood across a large but extremely thin blood gas barrier, right? The membrane enables sufficient gas exchange to occur via simple diffusion. Okay, I'm not going to go through simple diffusion because this is another process that I have to explain it. I will have to draw more than this and make you understand it. If you do not understand simple diffusion, please put it in the comment below. Then I will make a video just separate on simple diffusion. I'm going to move on. The respiratory system includes the upper airways. So, the respiratory system includes the upper airways. So what they mean here is that the upper airways are still considered the respiratory system, like the larynx and the trachea is still with the upper. Okay. Chest wall, respiratory muscles, lower airways, pulmonary blood vessels, support nerves, and lymphatics. So they're giving you here a bunch of them that are still considered respiratory system. Now they say these organs support gas exchange and form early in the developing human. They undergo dramatic functional changes at the time of birth, beginning its primary role of breathing and external respiration at the moment. From the moment of conception, the human body undergoes tremendous growth and development, from embryo to fetus, to an infant and a child, through puberty and into young adult. So they tell you here what happens. Conception. If you do not know what this means, please look it up. This is what I always do. If I don't know a word, I will circle it, then I will look it up on Google. So I'm just gonna put here Google it. Okay. A gradual loss of lung tissue and functional changes continue through the elderly years until the time of death. So, during the life of a span of a human, the respiratory system maintains external respiration by matching phenomenal amounts of air with a similar amount of blood flow. So you see the word external respiration is coming back again, which is very, very important. When it comes back again, that means it was important at the beginning, right? And we already understand what it means. What it means is matching of a blood vessel and atmospheric oxygen exchange between them. So here the sentence is telling you here that during the life of a span of a human being, during your whole life, if you live like a year, if you live like a 50 year, or 60 years, or 100 years, or 200 years, or whatever, how long you live, throughout those years, external respiration by matching phenomenal amounts of air with similar amount of blood flow. So blood and external oxygen is matching for a long time. Now they give you here approximately 250 million liters of each are moved and matched during the average 75-year-old lifespan. So that means if you are 75 years old, in that lifetime is approximately 250 million liters of each have matched. Can you imagine 250 million liters of gas and 250 liters of blood matched in that 75 years, which is exchanged between them? The respiratory system normally moves this amount of air and blood flow with a minimal amount of work. So even though it's a big number, 250 million liters, but the respiratory system, I should say the cardiopulmonary system, the whole system, the heart and the lung, because they work together. The heart is pumping the blood to the lung, and then the lung is, exchanging that oxygen in the carbon dioxide elimination. So they only do a small amount of work to do that, even though it takes, when you think about it, it's a huge job, but the work is not that much. This is what they're saying here. The respiratory system normally moves this amount of air and blood flow with a minimal amount of work, with not too much work, right? This system humidifies and warms inspired air while moving inhaled, continuous, and filtering out chemicals and small blood clots deposited or formed in the blood. So, this is the job of the respiratory system. It humidifies, it warms the inspired air, and filter out chemicals and small blood clots deposited from a blood vessel. Can you imagine? The respirator humidifies, warms inspired air, and does all of that. The respiratory system is regulated by the nervous system. So what regulates the respiratory system is the nervous system. It is capable of increasing function in response to elevated demands brought on by stressful conditions such as exercise and disease. So here it's telling you that the nervous system can increase the function of the respiratory system in two cases. Stressful condition, which is exercise, almost, because when you exercise, when you run, you stress out yourself because your heart is pumping faster, you're trying to wear out, and a disease. So those are the two things that will have the respiratory system function increase. So when you have a disease, you need to breathe more, or your body is not the system is working more. And when you exercise, the system is working more. So let's move on to this top paragraph here. A functional understanding of a normal anatomy and physiology of the respiratory system is crucial to proper understanding of pulmonary disease and its treatment. The role of a respiratory care therapist is assessment and treatment of cardiopulmonary disorders requires an in-depth understanding of the structural and functional nature of the respiratory system. So this whole paragraph here, what it's telling you is, in order for you to be a successful respiratory therapist, you must understand the function of the respiratory system in depth. You must understand the function, the anatomy and physiology of the respiratory system, because it will help you to help a lot of people out there with diseases that is related to a respiratory system. It's kind of like this. If you have a car and you are a mechanic, you know everything about the car. If you are going down the road and it breaks down, and you know everything inside the car of your car, and you are a mechanic, you are most likely going to know what's going on with the system, with the car. You can step down, take care of the car, pop up the hood, and see what's in there and fix it. But if you do not know the system, if you are not a car mechanic, and you're going down the road and breaks down, you have nowhere to go. You don't understand. You're not a mechanic. So same thing here. This paragraph here is very important in a way to tell you must take this serious and try to understand as much as you can about the respiratory system. the anatomy and physiology, how things work. Because when you understand that, you will be helping a lot of people with respiratory diseases such as COPD, asthma, and etc. Okay, let's move on. Development of the respiratory system. So this is going to tell you about the development of the whole respiratory system. Right? We're going to start. The developing human undergoes a remarkable transformation from a single cell to an individual with a nearly complete set of organ systems. The developmental phase of fertilized egg are divided into embryonic and fetal periods. The embryonic period occurs during the first 8 weeks of pregnancy. Major organs will develop during this period. So, the embryonic period occurs during the first 8 weeks of pregnancy. So during the 8 weeks, during 2 months of pregnancy, 2 months of pregnancy. So the 2 months of pregnancy major organs will develop during that period. Major organs will develop anyway. So during the first 2 weeks of major, that means probably the heart, I don't know, let's keep reading. Major organs will develop during this period. The fetal period occurs during the remaining 32 weeks of pregnancy. That's a different period. So this first one is called the embryonic period, occurs during the first week. So this is called an embryonic period. So now I know 2 things. I'm gonna go up here, right? And I'm gonna write down embryonic I'm gonna put a P for period, happens during the first 2 months. And then the fetal period, P for period, is the remaining 32 weeks. So the first 2 months of pregnancy, or the first 8 weeks of pregnancy, is called an embryonic period, and the rest of it is called the fetal period. So that's all. You don't have to confuse yourself with this. The first one is embryonic period, the first 8 weeks or the first 2 months. Rest of it is called what? A fetal period. That's it. Make it simple. Right, okay, now where we at? Okay. During this period, the organs continue to develop and refine their structure and function. The respiratory system develops during these periods as a fluid-filled structure playing no role in gas exchange, yet must be developed sufficiently to assume this crucial activity at the time of birth. Its development is a continuous process that begins in the early stages of the embryonic period and extends for years after birth. The embryonic is made up of 3 distinct germinal tissues layers that ultimately form all tissues and organs: endoderm, mesoderm, and ectoderm. From these layers, the organs and systems will arise. This right here is important. They have a lot of details here, but is important details. And I'm gonna go into detail with it. I'm not gonna skip this here. Okay, let me skip this paper here, and it's gonna help me break it down for you. So the first key point is that we're gonna go back here. Okay, the first